Welcome to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal, your trusted source for personal injury claims in Western Australia. Each week, we simplify complex legal issues, from motor vehicle accidents to workplace injuries, so you can confidently navigate your rights and secure the compensation you deserve.
All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive on something pretty interesting.
Okay.
It's about this truck driver in Western Australia who ended up winning $250,000 in workers' comp.
Wow.
So we're going to be talking about, employer negligence, mechanical issues, and all the things that go into proving these cases, especially the medical evidence.
Yeah, it's a real David and Goliath story, this one.
It is.
And the details are fascinating.
Yeah.
It shows how an accident that seems pretty minor can actually have these huge repercussions, especially when, the employer is negligent.
Exactly. And I think this is a case that will resonate with anyone who, works with vehicles or heavy machinery.
Absolutely.
It really highlights how important it is to understand your rights as a worker.
100%. So,
yeah.
Should we set the scene then?
Yeah, let's set the scene.
Okay, so we have this truck driver.
Okay.
He's experienced, but he's new to this particular truck.
Okay.
It's a K527.
Okay.
And here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
He had reported some mechanical issues with the truck before the accident even happened.
Oh, really? So it wasn't just a one-off?
No, not at all.
Okay.
He had reported problems with the accelerator sticking and the brakes, being a bit dodgy.
Right.
And importantly, he didn't just, complain to his mates about it.
Right.
He actually went through the official channels
Yeah.
and filed, formal reports with his employer.
Wow.
Outlining these issues.
So he did everything by the book, essentially creating a paper trail.
Exactly. He understood how important documentation is.
Yeah.
And, as we'll see, this documentation becomes absolutely critical later on.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
So the accident itself happened on January 4th, 1995.
Okay.
At a building and construction materials company in Kwinana, Western Australia.
Oh, right.
And from what I understand, the truck driver was approaching a security gate
Okay.
when the accelerator stuck and the brakes failed.
Oh, wow.
And obviously this led to a collision.
Right. It sounds pretty straightforward, but, even accidents that seem simple
Yeah.
can lead to,
Complications.
yeah, all sorts of complications.
Yeah, because even though he was wearing a seatbelt and there was another driver there to help him immediately,
Right.
this wasn't exactly, just a fender bender.
No, it wasn't.
Right.
The impact, even at relatively low speed, caused some pretty serious injuries.
Okay.
We're talking whiplash, pain radiating down his right arm and leg,
Oh, wow.
chronic headaches that just wouldn't quit,
Oh, man.
and sleep disturbances as well.
That's interesting that you mentioned the sleep disturbances.
Yeah.
You don't always hear about that as a consequence
Yeah.
of an accident like that.
That's true, and I think it really speaks to the wider impact
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
workplace injuries can have.
Right.
Often the physical pain is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
And in this case, the truck driver also started experiencing these psychological issues.
Right.
Like depression, anxiety, and frustration.
So it wasn't just his body that was hurting. It was his mind as well.
Exactly.
And that raises a really important question. How does what seems like a pretty minor accident,
Yeah.
like hitting a gate at low speed,
Yeah.
how does that lead to such long-lasting and significant injuries,
Right.
both physical and mental?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And that's where the specifics of this case and
Okay.
what the truck driver's lawyers did
Yeah.
become really illuminating.
Okay, I'm ready for it.
All right. So the truck driver's legal team, they focused on proving that a building and construction materials company was negligent,
Okay.
that they, failed in their duty to provide a safe workplace.
So it wasn't just about the accident itself,
Right.
but about what led up to it.
Exactly. And remember those reports that the truck driver filed
Yeah.
about the mechanical problems?
Yeah, the paper trail.
Those became like key pieces of evidence.
So that's where that really paid off.
Absolutely. The report showed that the company knew about these issues,
Right.
but they didn't actually take any steps to fix them.
So it's a classic case of, knowing but not doing.
Yeah, pretty much.
It sounds like they were just hoping that nothing bad would happen.
Well, unfortunately for them, that's not a valid legal defense.
Right.
And to really hammer that point home,
Yeah.
the truck driver's lawyers, they brought in an expert witness,
Okay.
a mechanical engineer named Dr. Casey,
All right.
to examine the truck after the accident.
Okay, so what did Dr. Casey find?
Well, his findings were pretty damning.
Okay.
He found a chafed throttle cable,
Uh-huh.
a missing nylon brush,
Okay.
which should have prevented that chafing,
Right?
and get this, a buildup of sludge in the air tanks,
Hmm.
which could have messed with the braving system.
Wow. So it wasn't just one thing. It was a
No.
combination of factors.
Yeah, a whole bunch of this.
All pointing to, poor maintenance.
Exactly. And remember,
And the company was aware of at least some of these problems
Yeah.
because of the driver's reports.
exactly. Now, the company, they tried to fight back, of course.
Okay.
They argued that the truck driver was partially to blame.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Really?
They claimed that, he could have avoided the accident by
Oh.
driving slower
Uh-huh.
or making sure the air tanks were properly drained.
So they're trying to say it was his fault,
Yeah, they were trying to shift some of the blame back onto him.
even though he reported these problems?
Yeah, but there's this legal principle
Okay.
called non-delegable duty of care
Okay.
that really comes into play here.
Okay, break that down for me.
Okay.
Non-delegible duty of care.
So it basically means that even if a building and construction materials company hired another company
Okay.
to handle the truck maintenance,
Yeah.
they're still ultimately responsible for the safety of their employees who operate those vehicles.
So even if they had a third-party mechanic,
Right.
they can't just pass the buck
Exactly.
when it comes to employee safety.
The responsibility lies with the employer to provide a safe working environment.
Got it.
Period.
And the truck driver's legal team
Yeah.
did a really good job of proving that the company failed in that responsibility.
They did a fantastic job.
But it doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
What else did they have to prove?
Well, they also had to prove that the truck driver's injuries
Right.
were related to the accident,
Right.
and that those injuries were serious enough to warrant a significant payout.
Okay.
And that's where the medical evidence really comes in.
Right, let's talk about that.
Okay.
We know he had whiplash and other physical injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you prove that those are serious enough
Yeah.
to justify a $250,000 payout?
Well, you have to think about the long-term effects of these injuries.
Okay.
Things like chronic pain,
Right.
limited mobility.
Uh-huh.
And remember, he was also experiencing those psychological problems.
Right, the depression, anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. And these can be incredibly debilitating.
Yeah.
And have a huge impact on someone's quality of life
Yeah.
and their ability to work.
Absolutely, because it's not like you can just snap out of it.
Exactly. But, it's not enough to just say you're suffering.
Right.
You need solid medical documentation
Yeah.
to back up your claim.
Of course.
And this is where the truck drivers team, they really shine.
Maybe.
They presented this whole team of medical professionals
Okay.
to back up his case.
So who were these medical experts?
Well, first up, you've got his GP, Dr. Patel.
Okay.
And he was very clear.
Okay.
He recommended that the truck driver find a different job
Okay.
because the pain was so severe and so persistent
Yeah.
that driving was just making it worse.
That makes sense. You can't expect someone to keep working
Right.
if
Yeah.
it's causing them more harm.
Exactly. Then another GP, Dr. Forbes,
Okay.
confirmed that the truck driver had a history of back pain,
Uh-huh.
but testified that the accident had made it significantly worse.
Right.
And then they brought in the big guns.
Okay. Who are the big guns?
A neurologist, Professor Mastaglia, he
Okay.
examined the truck driver 6 years after the accident.
6 years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Professor Mastaglia found evidence of a serious and permanent spinal injury
Wow.
that was directly related to the accident.
So they had the employer negligence,
Mm-hmm.
the damning mechanical evidence.
Right.
And now this team of medical experts
Yeah.
backing up the severity of the truck driver's injuries.
It was a strong case.
Yeah, it's starting to sound like an open and shut case.
It really was, and the court agreed.
They did.
The truck driver won his case
He did.
and was awarded a total of $257,668.10.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about that payout.
Okay.
$250,000, what went into that figure?
Yeah, so it wasn't just some random number. It was broken down into these different categories
Okay.
to, compensate him for his various losses.
Yeah, let's break it down then. It'll be
Uh-huh.
interesting to see what kinds of things are considered
Sure.
when calculating these payouts.
So the biggest chunk was for something called general damages,
Okay.
which came to $150,000.
General damages, what does that cover?
So general damages are meant to compensate for pain and suffering,
Okay.
loss of enjoyment of life,
Mm-hmm.
and any permanent disability
Right.
resulting from the accident
So basically, it's for the overall impact the injuries have had
on his life.
on his life. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It acknowledges that these injuries go beyond just physical pain.
Absolutely.
What else was factored in?
Okay, so he also received $14,917.02
Okay.
for past economic loss,
Okay.
plus another $4,751.08 in interest on that amount.
So that's for the wages he lost
Exactly.
while he was recovering.
Yeah, the time he couldn't work.
Right, because of his injuries.
Exactly. But the court didn't stop there.
Oh, really?
They also awarded him $25,000
Okay.
for future economic loss.
Future economic loss. Why would they include that?
Well, because, his injuries might prevent him
Right.
from doing the same kind of work he did before.
Okay.
Or maybe he won't be able to work as many hours.
Right.
So this part of the payout is meant to cover,
Got it.
those potential future losses.
So they're taking into account the long-term impact of the accident
Yeah.
on his ability to earn a living?
Exactly.
That's pretty comprehensive.
It is. And there's one more piece of the payout
Okay.
that I think is particularly interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's for gratuitous services.
Okay.
He received $5,000 for past gratuitous services.
Okay.
Plus $1,000 in interest.
Okay.
And then a whopping $57,000
Wow.
for future gratuitous services.
Okay, I have to admit I'm a little lost.
Yeah.
What are gratuitous services?
So this refers to the care and assistance he needed
All right.
family and friends
Okay.
because of his injuries.
Mhm.
Things like cooking, cleaning,
Right.
driving him to
Yeah,
appointments.
all those things you need.
Exactly.
The recovering
right.
of the
That's
need.
not gets to get done, but you can't do it yourself.
Right, so it recognizes that even if those services weren't paid for directly,
Yeah.
they still represent a real cost.
Exactly. The court is acknowledging the burden placed on his loved ones.
Right.
Who had to, step in and help him.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So to recap, the payout wasn't just about his physical and emotional suffering,
Right.
but also for his lost wages,
Yeah.
both past and future,
Mm-hmm.
and even the unpaid help he received from family and friends.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that the true cost of a workplace injury
Yeah.
goes way beyond just medical bills.
100%. And I think this case really highlights how important it is to seek legal advice early on. If you're ever injured at work,
Absolutely.
a good lawyer can help you gather the evidence,
Right.
Understand your rights,
Yeah.
and build a strong case to make sure you get the compensation you deserve.
So for anyone listening who might be going through something similar,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways from this case?
Okay. Well, I think the biggest lesson here
Yeah.
is documentation.
Documentation.
Report any mechanical issues to your employer immediately.
Right.
And make sure you do it in writing.
Yeah.
Think of it like creating a paper trail
A paper trail, yeah.
to protect yourself.
So don't just casually mention it to someone.
No.
Put it in writing.
Get it in writing.
Keep a copy for yourself.
Exactly. And if you are in an accident, no matter how small it might seem,
Right.
gather as much evidence as you can.
Okay.
Photos, witness statements,
Okay.
anything that can help tell your side of the story.
Right. And I imagine seeking medical attention immediately is critical too,
Absolutely.
even if you think you're okay.
Yeah, even if you think you're fine, see a doctor, get those injuries documented,
Right.
and keep a record of your treatment and recovery.
Okay.
And, of course, reach out to a lawyer who specializes in a workers' comp claims.
Right.
They can guide you through the legal process and help you understand your options.
And speaking of lawyers, if you're in Western Australia,
Yeah.
there's a great firm called Foyle Legal.
Okay.
They focus on workers' comp cases
Right.
and have a really solid reputation.
They sound like a good resource.
They are.
Having someone in your corner who knows this area of law
Yeah.
can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We went from a truck driver reporting a sticky accelerator
Yeah.
to a $250,000 payout.
That's amazing.
It's a really powerful reminder that workplace accidents can happen to anyone,
They can.
and that even seemingly minor incidents. Here's something to ponder.
Okay.
Would you know what to do
Mm,
if you were injured at work?
that's a good question.
Take a moment to think about your own workplace safety
Yeah.
and the resources that are available to you,
Yeah,
because being informed is the first step
it is.
towards protecting yourself.
Knowledge is power,
It is.
especially when it comes to your well-being.
Well said. That wraps up our deep dive for today.
It does.
Until next time, stay safe and informed.
Stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in to Personal Injury Claims, explained by Foyle Legal. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes and isn't legal advice. For advice specific to your situation, visit us at Foyle Legal. And don't forget to subscribe or leave a review.